Which is better, Google Pixel 8a or Samsung Galaxy A55 5G? Well, in this video, we're going to find out. What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with my comparison of the Google Pixel 8a versus the Samsung Galaxy A55 5G. Now, for full disclosure, Google did send me this phone. This device is a gift from Google, and I am part of Team Pixel, but all opinions expressed in this video are completely my own. And then for the Samsung Galaxy A55 5G, I did buy this phone with my own money. However, I have also worked with Samsung on various projects in the past. Now, I figured this video would be very interesting to make, considering that both of these phones recently launched from both Google and Samsung. Now, for the Google Pixel 8a, this phone is being sold currently in the US, but surprisingly, the Galaxy A55 5G is currently not available in the US. So I'm not sure if that's a permanent thing, or if it's ever going to be offered at all. I'm not really sure, but I do really like this phone, which is also why I wanted to compare it to the Pixel 8a. Now, because these devices are sold in different regions, as far as pricing goes, that comparison isn't super relevant, I suppose. Now, if you are located in the US, you can definitely buy a Galaxy A55 5G. Just keep in mind that it's not meant for this region. But I will be leaving a link to it in the video description, just in case you want to look into the possibility of getting one. And of course, I'll also leave a link for the Pixel 8a. Now, these devices do share quite a bit in common, considering that they are meant to be mid-range smartphones. That being said, though, they also have quite a few differences, and I'm looking forward to going over all of that here in this video. Now, the first thing I want to discuss are the displays of these two phones. Now, the displays are different in size, that's the first difference. So with the Pixel 8a, we're getting a 6.1-inch display compared to a 6.6-inch display with the Galaxy A55. So you can see when holding the two phones side by side here, without a doubt, the A55 is the bigger phone of the two. So that definitely makes sense. And then as far as the displays go, they are also different as far as the actual display type. So with the Google Pixel 8a, we are getting an OLED display here compared to a Super AMOLED display with the Galaxy A55. And then both phones do feature a 120Hz refresh rate. Now, OLED versus AMOLED, of course, they are in the same family of displays, and along with that, we are getting great viewing angles with both devices, and then also very vibrant colors here too. So at first glance, when you look at the displays in these phones, they definitely make the phones appear to be a lot more expensive than they actually are, so that's certainly a good thing. And then the displays are 1080p, so everything's super crisp and clear here. And then we are getting a PPI of 430 with the Pixel 8a, compared to a PPI of 390 with the A55. And then the Pixel 8a has a 20:9 aspect ratio compared to a 19.5:9 aspect ratio with the Galaxy A55. So pretty similar overall. And then when it comes to the bezels here, we are getting a screen-to-body ratio of 81.6% with the 8a. And then a little bit thinner of bezels here with the A55 5G, with it being 85.8%. So you can see, though, both phones do have very small bezels all throughout. I also appreciate that the bezels on both phones are essentially symmetrical, too. Sometimes on lower end or mid-range phones, you'll get a slightly thicker bottom bezel. And even if the difference is like a slight millimeter, it always kind of annoys me a little bit. So I'm glad that Samsung and Google really put a lot of attention into detail with these two devices. Now, with both phones, we do have hole punches up top for the front-facing cameras. And then with the Pixel 8a, we have a 13-megapixel front-facing camera compared to a 32-megapixel front-facing camera with the Samsung. And then both of these phones do feature 128 gigabytes of internal storage. However, with the 8a, there is no microSD card expansion, whereas with the Samsung, we do have microSD card expansion. So 128 gigs is definitely quite a bit of storage, and I feel like it's plenty for most people out there, but it is still nice having that option to add in a microSD card. So I am glad that we're getting that option here with the A55 5G, and I do wish that was offered here with the Pixel 8a. But I suppose if you know for a fact you're not going to need that much storage, or you're not going to be anywhere close to filling up 128 gigs, then I suppose not having SD card expansion might not matter to you a whole lot. On the other hand, though, I know there are quite a few people who really miss the days of having a flagship Android smartphone that has microSD card expansion, and at this point, those people are now looking for other devices that still offer that feature. So if you are one of those people, just know that you are at least getting that here with the A55 5G, and who knows, maybe the A56 will finally remove SD card expansion. It's really hard to predict the future. Now, on a more positive note, though, for the Pixel, this phone has wireless charging at up to 7.5 watts. So that's really cool. Of course, you will have to use a wireless charger that can charge it up to that rate, but it is nice that there is wireless charging here. Whereas with the Samsung, there is no wireless charging at all. So there are no A series phones, at least that I'm aware of, that offer wireless charging. They never have and probably won't anytime soon. So if that matters to you, then just know that the Pixel 8a is the only phone of the two that offers that. Now, both of these devices do feature face unlock, so that's really awesome. And then they both also have in-display fingerprint sensors. So let's try this out first with the Pixel 8a. And you can see very fast there and responsive. Let's try that one more time. So that works really well. And then we'll give it a try here with the A55 5G. There we go, very fast. We'll try that again. And very fast. Now, one difference here that is kind of a small difference, but it might matter to you, is that you can see the placement of the fingerprint sensors is different. So on the Samsung, it's a lot lower, whereas on the Pixel, it's a little bit higher. Now, some people might prefer one way or the other. It really just depends, but just keep in mind that that is a difference here. And then taking a look at the back of the phones, we have some similarities, but also some differences with the cameras. So with the Pixel, we have a dual camera setup, and then with the Samsung, we have a triple camera setup. However, the third camera here on the Samsung is a little bit pointless. So basically, both phones have the main camera, of course. So with the Pixel, it's 64 megapixels, and then the Galaxy has 50 megapixels for the main camera. And then with the Pixel, we have a 13 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, and then a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle camera with the A55. And then the A55 also has a 5 megapixel macro camera. So the macro camera honestly is a bit pointless. Let me pull up the camera apps in both phones right now and kind of show you what I mean by this. But you can see here, we'll pull this up and also pull it up on the Samsung. There we go. So let's see here. So you can see here's the standard cameras on both phones. Whoops, let me move this as well. There we go, got it perfect now. So the standard camera is right there, but then with the Samsung, you go over to the More tab, and then we can access the macro camera, and then with macro, you can get very close up and have things be in really good detail. So while that feature is at least somewhat useful, at the same time, I feel like it's really not. So I don't consider the third camera here to be much of a selling point. It's really just to show that the phone has an extra camera, I suppose. But you can see back to the main cameras here in both phones. Then from there, we can switch over to the ultra wide cameras. And then with that, we can fit a lot more content into a single frame here. Definitely a nice feature. I do find myself using the ultra wide quite often, especially when I'm traveling, for example. We can also head over to portrait mode in both phones and get those nice blurred out backgrounds that I know that many people are a big fan of. This is kind of interesting though. You can see in portrait mode, it crops in way further with the Pixel compared to the Samsung. So it's pretty dramatic. It's quite a significant difference there. So keep that in mind too. And then here's the front-facing cameras in portrait mode. And it actually looks like in this situation, the Samsung actually crops in more for the front-facing camera. And then both phones do have an option to crop in slightly. So if you want to kind of more focus on yourself, I suppose, you can make that adjustment. I'm not really sure how useful that is. We can also head over to the standard selfie mode here on both phones. So if you don't always want to capture portrait photos with the front-facing camera, you don't need to. So what's cool about these phones is that even though they are meant to be mid-range phones, we're still getting a lot of different camera features here, and it's definitely a nice preview if you want to kind of give all these features a try before considering spending more on a flagship smartphone. So something worth considering. Now getting into the fun part, the performance of these devices. So they are meant to be, of course, mid-range smartphones, but at the same time, I think Google and Samsung are serious about providing a good user experience with these devices. It's not like the old school Android devices where if you didn't buy the best of the best, you're pretty much getting the worst of the worst. These phones are totally capable for most people out there, so definitely don't be afraid to give them a try. Now, both phones have 8 gigabytes of RAM, so that's one thing they have in common, but then the processors are different. So the Google Pixel 8a has the Google Tensor G3, and then with the Galaxy A55, we have the Exynos 1480. So I did actually run benchmark tests using Geekbench 6 on both devices. So I'll show you the scores from that test right now. But you can see here on the Pixel, there's the score, and then on the Samsung, we did get a bit of a lower score. So the numbers kind of speak for themselves. Definitely expect to get better performance overall with the Pixel 8a. But at the same time, I certainly would not discount the Samsung as being slow. That's certainly not the case here. And as far as video recording goes, both phones do support 4K video for both the front and rear cameras. However, with the 8A, we actually can take 60 FPS video with the rear camera, whereas for 4K with the A55, it is limited at 30 FPS with both the rear and front cameras. And then as far as the battery capacity goes, we are getting a bigger battery with the A55. We're getting a 5,000 milliamp hour internal battery compared to the Pixel 8A, which has a smaller 4,492 milliamp hour battery. And then with the Pixel 8A, this phone can recharge it up to 18 watts, whereas the A55 does support up to 25 watt fast charging. So that does actually make a pretty big difference between 18 watts and 25 watts, but keep in mind that you won't be able to get either of those fast charging speeds unless you are actually using a charger that does support it. So something to remember there. Now, as far as the software goes, both phones do run Android 14 out of the box. We are getting, of course, Google's Pixel experience here compared to Samsung's One UI. And if you've used any Samsung phone in the last 5 or 6 years even, the experience should be pretty familiar here to you, but it really comes down to personal preference. I feel like both approaches to Android have their pros and cons. Each company also has different exclusive features too, so overall I feel like you'll be happy either way, but it could come down to personal preference as well. And then both phones do feature stereo speakers, which is excellent, and then also NFC for tap and pay. Now, taking a closer look at the actual build of these devices, I already talked quite a bit about the front panels here in both phones, but taking a look at everything else, you can see that there are some major differences. So the first thing is, the Samsung is a lot more boxy, whereas the Pixel is a lot more rounded. So not only does it have rounded corners, but it's also rounded around the sides here too, whereas the Samsung is definitely very squared off. Now, both phones do have metal on the sides, and it's definitely a different approach in the sense that it's just kind of a painted metal here with the Pixel 8A, whereas the Samsung kind of has this cool brushed look to it. Definitely very interesting and especially unique for an A-series phone, that's for sure. Definitely really like the look of this. I think definitely out of the two of these phones, the A55 is the more exciting design of the two. And then on the back of the two devices, we do of course have a matte versus glossy finish, but also the Pixel 8A does have plastic on the back, whereas we are getting glass on the back here of the Samsung. So in conclusion, I think both of these are excellent smartphones from both Google and Samsung. However, there are things that you will want to keep in mind. So, for example, one of the benefits of the Pixel 8A is that it is more powerful with this Tensor G3 processor. Also expect to get better camera quality as well, since we're pretty much getting flagship level cameras here with this device. Now with the Galaxy A55, we're getting a bigger display here. We're also getting a larger battery. We're also getting faster charging as well. And then also with this phone, we are getting microSD card expansion, which I know for a lot of people is really important. So those are pretty much the main differences. Of course, also the Pixel 8A has wireless charging, whereas the Samsung does not. But those are pretty much the major differences between these two devices. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you liked it, definitely give it a thumbs up. But this is Kevin here, and I will see you in the next one. Take care and have a great rest of your day.